Nigel Wright, the Prime Minister's elusive ex-chief of staff, walked right past our camera today. But this central figure in the Senate scandal continues to dodge questions about his role or whether there is indeed an email trail of his deal with Mike Duffy. Across town, the former Tory senator was the subject of ridicule.
2,150 cubic feet of hot air with a grossly inflated sense of his own self-importance and a giant bag of taxpayer money.
The Canadian Taxpayers Federation using a giant inflatable Mike Duffy to launch a campaign for a national referendum on abolishing the Senate, an idea already floated by a Tory senator.
Senate reform has largely been a failure. And meanwhile, we keep paying $90 million every year.
Until now, the Taxpayer Federation's members have been split on Senate reform, but a survey in June found 65% favor abolishing the upper chamber altogether, and 82% want to let voters decide in a referendum. As the government waits for the Supreme Court to rule on its Senate reform plan to appoint provincially elected senators with limited terms, Stephen Harper has appointed a top partisan attacker to oversee the file. Today, Pierre Poilievre would only issue a statement saying, in part, "I believe in the Prime Minister's democratic reform agenda and will work to make it happen." Poilievre dodged our question about whether the government supports a referendum. Shirley Engel, Global News, Ottawa.
I want that balloon.
I want it too.
I want to get my own balloon so I could just, put it up everywhere. And then, like a big Christy Clark or a big Walter Gray, like our local mayor.
Or a big Vic Taves.
No, because you know what will happen, right?
Yeah.
The guys will come out with slingshots and start taking it down. And then same thing with the Stephen Harper balloon. There'd be a guy with a match there, right?
Oh, definitely. I bet he was never so glad to leave the country on trade negotiations.
Let's check this out.
Well, Alison, what is so damaging about this RCMP affidavit is that it contradicts the government's version and backs up the opposition's. It says that the Prime Minister's then Chief of Staff, Nigel Wright, tried to buy Senator Mike Duffy's silence by covering his fraudulent expense claims. And that deal, the RCMP says, was a crime.
From the start, Duffy claimed that he and his wife paid it all back themselves. But Duffy didn't pay, and still hasn't, because then Chief of Staff Nigel Wright did pay all $90,000. The government has always claimed that was just a generous gift, so taxpayers wouldn't be stuck with what the RCMP calls Duffy's pattern of fraudulent expense claims. Not so, says the RCMP's affidavit. There was an agreement between Duffy and Wright involving repayment of the $90,000 and a Senate report that would not be critical of him, constituting an offense of frauds on the government. It goes on. Wright's own lawyers partially confirmed this by saying that Wright had two conditions of Duffy in return for the money: to pay it immediately and stop talking to the media about it. So the Mounties say it wasn't a gift. There were strings attached. Wright's lawyers told the RCMP Harper didn't know about the payment, but that 3 PMO staffers did, including Harper's staff lawyer Benjamin Perrin. That contradicts Harper's own story.
Now, Harper has also insisted that there was no formal agreement between Wright and Duffy. But, formal or not, the RCMP say there definitely was an agreement, and that Harper's lawyer and Duffy's knew about it.
So there you go. The RCMP flies into action, and the Harper government is lying.
Well, what else is new?
I mean, I don't know. Accountability, transparency, yes, we're still looking for those things and cannot find them. But there you go. Like Duffy with strings attached.
Bribing a senator?
Yeah. Okay, now you got to be quiet about this, and we'll give you $90,000.
Kudos to the CBC for exposing this.
Yeah, not ending up in the trunk of a car. You're listening to Video Radio. I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Nispin.
We're just here to poke fun, have a good day, and make sure that the information gets out there so you know how to vote. What do you got for me, brother?
Well, every day Harper looks more and more like a Republican. And I think he took a page out of Tricky Dick's book.
Check this out. This is awesome.
Canada was not always governed by far-right neoconservatives as it is today. Indeed, for most of the 20th century, it was the Liberal Party of Canada which ruled the country. Many of the bureaucrats and judges who run Canada today cut their teeth in a Liberal Canada and do not adhere to the same ideology as Canada's current rulers. Thus, it was perhaps not surprising that this week it was revealed that the Prime Minister's office has drawn up an enemies list, singling out members of the Canadian establishment who are not friendly to the Harper government's political agenda. Critics say the fact that the Harper government felt compelled to create an enemies list is a sign that Canada's rulers are realizing the magnitude of their unpopularity, both among the Canadian populace as well as among bureaucrats and other officials in Ottawa. Enemies identified by the Prime Minister's office included members of the Senate and the courts, as well as the Auditor General and the Ethics Commissioner. Even non-neoconservative conservatives were singled out as, quote, enemies, including the progressive conservative Premier of Alberta, Alison Redford. Critics note that there is intense factionalism taking place on the Canadian right between traditional progressive conservatives and red Tories who promote Canadian sovereignty and more moderate policies, and the Harper neoconservatives who are implementing radical neoliberal, fear-based policies which render Canada a de facto colony of Washington and Tel Aviv.
The catchphrase there being, the Harper government is realizing its monumental unpopularity.
The magnitude of its unpopularity. I love that phrase.
I'm enjoying the show today. It's so cool. It's showing up for work, and then, you know, we're just jumping right in on Harper's Nightmare here. And yes, you screwed up again, and we have the internet. But, okay.
But, you know, there's still other problems in transparency in the neocon government.
Yes, there was an office that was set up. The Conservatives demanded that it got set up when the Liberals were in power, and it's all about the budget.
Yeah.
And there's a budget officer who's there to oversee things, and apparently he's supposed to be given all the information.
But he's not there anymore.
We didn't see a timely costing on fighter planes. We didn't see costing papers on tough on crime legislation.
As the former Parliamentary Budget Officer, Kevin Page often complained about the lack of cooperation from government departments, even taking his case to federal court last April. A source from within the PBO says they've now hit rock bottom and have started filing access to information requests. It's something any Canadian can do, but is normally used by journalists and interest groups as a last resort when the department won't provide the information up front.
I'm disappointed that it's had to come this far, that we've fallen this low. But I'm not surprised that the Legislative Budget Office is going to do whatever they can in order to get information to parliamentarians and Canadians.
In 2006, Stephen Harper swept into power preaching accountability. One of his first acts as Prime Minister was to create the Parliamentary Budget Watchdog to oversee government spending.
Well, this is nuts, quite frankly. I mean, the
Opposition parties say lately the Conservative attitude towards the PBO reflects the government's overall mantra.
Basically, if you're not in keeping with the Conservative spin, then you're an enemy. You're not somebody to be listened to.
The government disagrees. While Tony Clement wasn't available for an interview, his spokesman said, quote, "The government continues to provide the PBO with all information that falls within its mandate."
That is absolute bunk.
Liberal Scott Bryson argues the government tries to stonewall the PBO. And he says the budget officer is the one who revealed that the true cost of the F-35s was double what the Conservatives first claimed. A source within the PBO tells us their first access to information request will be filed within days. But from past experience, we can tell you a response from the department will take at least a month.
Well, it's nice to know that they're so transparent.
Okay, big buckets of shinola actually being heaped upon us because when the Parliamentary Budget Officer has to file an access to information thing, I mean, come on.
Well, you know, he's on that enemies list.
Yeah, I know, definitely. If you're not towing the company line, which is one of the major reasons why they left the cabinet at the end of before the summer break, rats left the ship. They had to shuffle their cabinet. You saw that they've got a whole brand new cabinet now.
Yeah, I don't know. Same boss or new boss, same job, something like that.
Yeah, I know. But as long as you follow the company line.
Exactly.
So, this?
The Honourable Member for Parkdale High Park now has the floor.
I repeat, Mr. Speaker, talking about transparency alone is not good enough.
Hear, hear.
The Conservatives have simply failed to be the transparent and accountable government that they promised Canadians 7 years ago. And we heard this week from senior officials from the finance minister's own department, former senior officials, who are saying that the Conservatives have also failed to uphold the integrity and credibility of the budget process.
Shame.
This is who Canadians are supposed to trust their tax dollars with? When will Conservatives stop hiding behind empty promises and start actually listening to Canadians?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint the member opposite. I will try to do better, Mr. Speaker. The report is by partisan Liberals who used to work, I guess, before my time at the Department of Finance. The nonpartisan C.D. Howe Institute did provide a detailed report showing that our government has been the most transparent government in Canada.
And just like $3.1 billion, they just sort of laugh it off.
How does he speak with such a forked tongue?
Yes. Well, it takes years and years of training, and you have to be really criminally obese to be able to pull that kind of stuff
and
off.
Probably sell your soul to the devil.
Yes.
You
Yes,
know.
indeed. But then again, you have to believe in the devil for that one, too,
Well,
right?
conservatives,
Yeah, I know. It's kind of weird, though, because accountability is not what this government is about, and just because they come out with a statement does not make it fact.
They talk about it all the time.
But they're showing us there is no democracy in Canada. You just elect another dictator, and they get to do anything they want because they don't care about me or you.
No.
We care. That's why we do what we do. This is Radio Free Canada. Video radio, a support system and part of humanity's ever-growing defense system against great big pitchforkfuls of
bull excrement.
Politically correct and being all like that. I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisbet.
Remember, check our facts. Make sure that you get out there and use our intellect. We do not create the commercials that say trust us.
And if you like us, tweet us, share us, put us around the net.
Yeah, because, well, blatant self-promotion, we got to get the information out there. But our number one goal is to make sure you start up a radio station or a newspaper to talk about the truth, because mainstream media isn't. Okay, stay tuned. We got a thing coming up. What?
Pot and politics.
You know it. Okay, it's a 4:20 break in the studio. We'll be right back after this.
Since 1971, when President Nixon took the United States off what was left of the gold standard, the world has operated under a system of money called Fiat. The dollar, the pound, the euro are all government fiat currencies. Fiat is a Latin word meaning let it be so. It is the law that this government currency be money. Indeed, without that legal enforcement, and the fact that we must pay taxes in this money, that dollar bill or that computer digit that represents a dollar would be pretty much meaningless. Only the government has the power to issue fiat money, but banks can create it through lending. If somebody wants to borrow $10, a bank can create it from nowhere and lend it. It can then charge interest. Banks also create money by lending against an asset, such as a house. They're given the deeds to the house, and they create the money out of nowhere and lend it, at interest, of course. But who benefits? Of course, those that have the power to issue money, governments and banks. They haven't had to do anything productive, they just create money. However money is created, be it through lending, fractional reserve banking, financial bailouts, or old-fashioned money printing, banks are always at or near the top of the money-issuing pyramid. In reality, this process of creating money only redistributes wealth from the bottom to the top of the pyramid. And thus that ever-increasing gulf between rich and poor gets bigger and bigger and bigger.